Hi, I'm Phil Palucha from Billionaires in Boxers, and you are about to engage with Up Level Your Communication, hosted by Miluna. Wow, this is going to be powerful. Communication is at the heart of everything that is good about business and about sharing with your fellow humans, and Miluna is phenomenal at helping you share that message and also interview some pretty special and amazing guests too. Check it out right now.
Welcome to Up Level Your Communication. I'm your host, Dr. Miluna Bausch. Listen to the music of your soul. Your voice matters, and on this show, expert guests will talk about the voice and intentional, enlightened communication, because this is how you will influence and impact the world. Welcome to Up Level Your Communication. My guest today is from Essex, the one in England, born and raised, and she is so many things. She is an airline captain, a mother, founder of a charity. She's an author, she's a speaker, and she's also an artist. And she and her husband built a home and live in the gorgeous Scottish Highlands. Here's the message that she wants to share with us today. Make a difference where you are. Joining us today, please welcome to the show, Emma Henderson.
Thank you. So great to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, Emma. At 18, you were gifted with a flying lesson for your birthday, and that changed everything. Tell us why.
Yes, it did. Well, I had been, when I was 10 years old, I'd been to see the space shuttle land at Stansted Airport and decided I was going to be an astronaut, but, didn't know how to do that. So I went to study. I wanted to study law and become a lawyer. But actually, for my 18th birthday, I must have really pestered my mum and dad, because for my 18th birthday, they gave me a flying lesson, and I landed from that 1-hour trial flight and said to mum and dad, that's what I want to do. I want to go and learn to fly. And my dad said, that's great. You need to go and learn to pay for it then. You need to go and earn the money to pay for the lessons. And I worked at a supermarket checkout for my, like a Saturday job. And there was no way that I was going to be able to save up. I probably earned about as much in a month as it would have taken to pay for one lesson. So I just couldn't see how that was going to happen. So I decided not to do that for now. And I went off to university eventually.
I love it. Well, as a person who still wants to learn to fly small planes, and I have had a couple lessons, my husband as well, who wanted to be a Swiss pilot. So there we go. There's something about flying. Oh my gosh.
There is something, it gets under your skin.
I don't think it lets go, perhaps. For you, it came out in another way. For us, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Never too late.
Never too late. Thank you. You learned languages at a day school. So tell me, were you a happy little kid? What was little Emma like?
I think little Emma was probably quite annoying. I asked lots of questions. I fought with my brother, like you're supposed to, properly scrapped each other, but then we also went and had fun as well. So I had a very uncomplicated upbringing. My mum and dad are still married to each other. We rode our bikes around. Do you remember when they used to cut the grass and they used to scoop all the grass clippings up into piles, and we used to go and jump in them, which they must have really hated. But, we used to just do really simple things like that, jumping in puddles, riding our bikes. And as we got older, maybe a bit of kissing boys and sneaking away from the house when we shouldn't have done. But very uncomplicated. I was not very popular at school. I didn't have many friends. I think I didn't make life easy for myself because I was probably really annoying, to be honest with you. But the friends I did have were really good friends, but I wasn't part of the cool crowd. I was a bit of a loner. I enjoyed school, which wasn't cool at the time. I really loved school. I thought it was a great place. I loved all the learning. And I think I was probably a little bit aloof, and I didn't mean to be, but I was very, very shy. So I didn't really know how to do friendship.
That makes so much sense. And I'm going to say that your curiosity and love of questions has served you very well. Doesn't it all?
It is for that.
As a kid, we're not so sure, but it served you. Now, what is the most fun thing about being a pilot? Captain.
Oh, I think that really every time I would be sitting at the end of a runway waiting for a takeoff clearance, there's this anticipation in the air, really. And you're very aware of the fact that you're about to launch a 72-ton aircraft into the air with 180 people sitting behind you expecting you to get it right. And there's something quite exciting about knowing that you know how to do that, to be honest with you. So I think, the takeoff and the landing is always the most exciting bit.
You also shared a beautiful concept with me, tea and empathy. Talk to us about what was born from that.
So when the world stood still in 2020, I had flown to Luxembourg. So actually, Sunday the 16th of March is the 5th anniversary of my last flight commercially. And I didn't know that was going to be my last flight. I left the aircraft that night, just looked back at it to check it was all put to bed properly, and didn't know that I just operated my last commercial flight. But I could sense something really big coming. So we were hearing about lots of people dying in Italy. This wave of illness was rampaging across the planet. And our NHS, our health service, was facing its biggest challenge ever, we were being told. And I just knew that whatever was coming was going to be bigger than we were kind of expecting. Lots of people were thinking, it'll be back to normal in 3 weeks. And I just thought, this does not feel like it's going to be over in 3 weeks. So I had been a peer support mentor at my airline, and I contacted the clinical psychologist that oversaw that program and said, look, I think there's a way we can help here. So he said, you're not the first person to say that. I'll put you in touch with this guy that I know from British Airways. And he put us in touch. We had a very short conversation where we agreed that we had the potential to help. And I had a platform and he had the medical in. So his girlfriend worked for the health service. So between us, we knew that we could make this thing happen. And I had a platform because I had been in an ITV documentary, a fly-on-the-wall documentary about what it's like to be a pilot. And because of that, I had become very well known as Captain Emma in this country. And in my airline, everybody knew who I was because I had worked at 5 bases. I'd been there for a long time, and I'd been on this documentary. And also, when you're a female pilot, you kind of stand out because there's not very many of us. So we decided that the way we were going to help was to ask hospitals to provide us with spaces that were big enough to practice social distancing, which is what we were being told at the time was going to keep us all safe. And no masks or anything, just go into the lounges. So we asked for voluntary aircrew to go in uniform into hospitals and provide exactly what you said, tea and empathy. So the lounges, they became first-class lounges because of all the donations that we had. And the initial idea was just to provide a space that was different from the wards where people were experiencing death in unprecedented numbers. I think we forget how many people died. We've just recently this Sunday had a series of memorials in the UK to commemorate the start of the COVID pandemic or when it arrived in the UK, and 30,000 people died. And, that's a lot. So, in fact, I think it was more than that. That was in the first few months, and you sort of forget that people were seeing death on a level that really you wouldn't even experience in a war. So we were just there to just take people out of that zone for a little while, sit them down, serve them a cup of tea, let them take the weight off their feet a moment, and just spend time sitting down beside them while they were facing these awful challenges that they were going through.
So gorgeous, so timely. You said something to me that I loved. One of your maybe philosophies, I might call it. Let people be who they are. And I think empathy is a huge part of that. If we simply listen and ask questions, isn't that the way to understand and just be a better human?
Yeah, 100%. And one of my favorite, I'm a bit of a Swiftie. I'll make no apologies for that. But one of my favorite Taylor Swift quotes is, if people don't like you for being who you are, be more you. And I think, we spend a lot of time looking at social media and magazines and the press. And there's an expectation that we've got to live our lives in a certain way and we've got to look a certain way. And, women all need to look like Barbie and men all need to look like Ken. And if you don't, you're different. And success looks like having 4 cars on the driveway and all the rest of it. And it's just rubbish. It's just a load of rubbish, because actually we are all valuable in our own way. And I think we just need to allow people, we just need to give each other space to be those different people and respect people for who they are. Just see the value in people, that just because somebody's not like me, it doesn't mean they don't have value in the world that I live in.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Now, on the website, just for fun, I saw you're wearing a hat. Now, I'm a member of the Hat Ladies of Charleston since I moved here, and we are a group who we like to go out and parade. We always wear a hat to our events. We do philanthropy and all sorts of volunteer work. Now, are you a frequent hat wearer, Emma?
Well, actually, I am quite a frequent hat wearer, but probably not the sorts of hats that you would wear, because, we live in the north of Scotland, and I was walking the dog this morning on the beach. It was 4 degrees and I had my woolly hat on. So I have a very large collection of woolly hats, but I also have quite an increasing collection of cowboy hats, because I go to a festival called Country to Country every year with my cousin, and that's this coming weekend. So that's the 4th year in a row that we've gone, and it will probably be the 4th cowboy hat I buy as well, to be honest with you. I've never found the right one. So if anybody thinks they know what cowboy hat is going to suit me the best, send it over and I'll wear it.
I think you'll have to come and visit me. We've got some fantastic hat shops right here in Charleston. They'll even make you a custom cowboy hat.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Well, I've got a load of other hats as well, because not so much now, but back in the 90s and early 2000s, if you went to a wedding, you wore a hat. So, I have posh hats and I have fascinators, and I've kept them all because, you never know when they're going to come back into fashion, do you?
It is now more in fashion here because the First Lady wore a hat to the inauguration.
Cool.
And so that's put it back on the map here. In fact, we were shopping yesterday at a Hat Ladies event. I have 3 new hats. A fancy hat for Easter, a more, just a proper hat, and a little gold fascinator with the netting. There you go. You love it.
Hat Ladies of Charleston, I love that.
So there's some hat wearing going on here in the Hat Ladies of Charleston. Now, in the UK, you received just an incredible award that I had not heard of, and perhaps others, unless perhaps you are also in the UK or perhaps in Scotland or Ireland. It's called an MBE. Tell us what the award is and what did it feel like to win it?
So the honours system in the UK goes back hundreds of years. I don't actually know when it was first brought in, but it's an award that is presented by the monarch. So now it would be awarded by King Charles III. My MBE was awarded to me by Her Majesty the Queen, and signed. You get a scroll that is signed by Her Majesty the Queen and also by Prince Philip. And I was the last tranche of people who were awarded state honours by the 2 of them, because Prince Philip died not long after that. So that was really special. He was my favourite royal, and I did meet him. I've been at dinner with him. So, that was really special. And it's basically, it's kind of a tiered level of awards. So if you do something at local level, you'd get a British Empire Medal. If you do something nationally, you might be awarded an MBE. And what that means is you become a member of the Order of the British Empire. It's very posh. And then the next level up is an OBE. Excuse me, an OBE. And that's where you become an officer of the British Empire. And so it goes up. So you then become a commander, and eventually you get made a knight of the realm. So you become a lord or lady, become a sir or a dame. And that's the highest order that you can have. Well, there's something called the Companion of the Garter. So that tells you that it's all steeped in tradition, and it's all issued by the monarch. And it's something that not very many people have. So I actually know quite a few people who have MBEs and OBEs because my husband's in the military. So in the military, people get awarded MBEs and OBEs fairly frequently. It's not unusual to hear of people that you know who've been nominated for it happens twice a year, January and so it's the New Year's honours list. And then you have what was the Queen's birthday, but it's now the King's birthday. And the official birthday is in June, regardless of when they're born. So twice a year, there's an opportunity for people to be put forward for these honours. And it's incredible. And when I found out that I was being nominated for one, you can choose whether or not you want to accept, because some people don't agree with the system, so they choose not to have them. But once you've agreed, you basically agree that you're not going to tell anyone. So for 8 weeks or 6 weeks or something like that, I wasn't allowed to say anything to anyone. And I talk for a living. I'm literally a professional speaker. I stand on stages at conferences delivering keynotes, and I was being told I wasn't allowed to say anything. I did tell my husband, so I was allowed to tell him, but swear him to secrecy. And I was allowed to tell one other person, and that was my press officer at Project Wingman, because I was awarded the medal for services to charity, and it was for Project Wingman. So actually, although it was awarded to me, it belongs to every single one of the 6,500 volunteers who supported the charity not just during the immediate lockdown, actually, of 2020, but over the last 5 years. The work that we did in 2020 is what was being rewarded there. And that belongs to everybody who got out of bed and did something they didn't have to do for people they didn't know.
It's so gorgeous. I'm in love with formality. I've always loved the British system. Congratulations. That's huge. That's huge.
I mean, you do it very well here. There's a reason why so many Americans tune into royal weddings. It's because we do it so well.
You do it well. The graciousness, the manners, the formality. I'm a fan. I have British and Irish ancestry, so I think it belongs to me as well, and I so appreciate it. Now, last week I met someone who said, I haven't read a book since college, and I was inviting him to my book event. Now, you're an author as well, and I think, gosh, not reading a book since college, I think everything probably starts just then, or certainly continues. I think it's all about learning and growing constantly. Now, I know you're a person who probably believes the same thing. You don't ever stand still. You continue to learn and grow and educate yourself. And it seems to me that you have courage and self-belief in doing so. Is that true? How do you feel, and how do you continue to embrace new experiences?
I think I do now. I think that it took me a long time to learn, certainly courage, because I left home and went and did a gap year working in London, and then just outside London for 6 months. And then I went to university. So I was still largely attached to home. And then I got married 11 days after I graduated. And I was then in this world where I was a military wife, and we moved around. Actually, we didn't move around initially for about 8 years, but our first move was to New Zealand. And, we couldn't have gone further away. And I think that I tend to, like most people, I tend to really not embrace change. If something's going to change, I'm very suspicious of it. I don't. Why do we need to change this? Why is the way that we're doing things now not good enough? And so I'm very reluctant to change things, and pilots are definitely like that. But actually, I've found that whenever things have changed, I've always come away having learned something new, having gained new friends, having gained a new perspective. And I think moving to New Zealand showed me that there is a big wide world outside the UK. It really broadened my horizons, because it's very easy, I think, to get stuck in, a very narrow-minded vision of what the world looks like if you stay in one place all the time. And when you travel, and especially if you live overseas, you find out that there's a different way of doing things that is equally as good as what you know. So if not better. And it just opens your eyes to different cultures and different experiences. So I think a lot of my kind of courage, and certainly when I moved to New Zealand, I was 30 years old. We had a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old and a 20-month-old. So we had our children really close together. And it was a big, bold move to move there because, I didn't have any family there. Well, my brother lives there, but, useful family, bless him. But, I didn't have my parents around. I didn't have my husband's parents around. So I could almost reinvent myself. And I'm not suggesting I needed to for bad reasons, but I could really find out who I was. So instead of being my parents' daughter, my dad was a big fish in a small pond. So I was Jerry's daughter, or Jerry and Ann's daughter. And I could find out who Emma Henderson was. And it turned out that Emma Henderson was somebody who wanted to learn to fly and took up triathlons and came back as a fully qualified commercial pilot. So, it turned out I was much braver than I expected I was going to be. And it was really, it was a really amazing gift to have that time there.
That is so fantastic. Thank you. Now, as a woman captain, and there are only 500 commercial female pilots in the world. Okay, that's a whole nother topic and show.
500. I want. The 500. So excited. Female captains, less than 500. There are more female pilots because you start as a first officer, but it's the captains that number doesn't really ever go up,
I always get excited when I do see a female captain, and it is rare, but I get so excited. And I think we need to, when we see that, we believe it. If little girls see a captain or a president, she believes that is something she can do.
100%. Absolutely.
How do we change this? Just keep sharing with little girls. Now, look, there's a female captain. She flies the plane. What can we do? Just live by example? Make sure, especially little girls, see this?
Well, I think from my point of view, I keep talking about it. So I don't most of my work is with businesses, either at conferences or on stages or doing workshops on leadership and things. But actually, I also go into schools. And we have a STEM ambassador program here. So I'm a STEM ambassador. So I go into schools when I can and talk about my job, talk about what it was like to be a pilot. And I think that, it's true. You can't be what you can't see. So if you have a role like being a female airline captain, for example, I think you then have a responsibility to shout about it. And so that's what I do. I make sure I talk about it all the time. And that's part of the reason I wrote my book. It's part of the reason I started speaking in the first place, because I became aware of the fact that my story was interesting to other people, because, I broke the mold, and I've broken the mold in more than one way. So, I'm a female airline captain. I'm also a mother of 3 children, and I had them, I did my training while they were small, and I then set the charity up. So I'm a bit of an overachiever, which is really annoying for everybody who knows me. And I don't mean to be. It's just that when I do something, I don't really believe there's a limit. So if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it well. And if I can't do it well, I won't do it, which is why I don't play golf. I'm really terrible at golf. If anybody's thinking, well, is there anything you can't do? There are 2 things. Ironing, I hate, and I'm rubbish at, and golf. So I don't do those things.
I'm with you. I tried golf in college only because there were cute guys in the class then, but I have no use for golf.
Why do you think I learned to fly planes in the military?
Well, you gave a perfect introduction. Show us your beautiful book, Grounded.
So I wrote my book, Grounded. And
she's got another copy handy. Beautiful. She's ready. So there it is, Grounded.
So this is me.
To write the book, Emma.
Well, after I got the MBE, people kept asking me to come and speak about my story, and they found it inspiring, because I'd become a pilot, but there had been a lot of challenges on the way to command. I had a serious illness, which it tried to kill me, but failed. Stupid illness. How dare it? And I had a number of other challenges as well. In my first year working for an airline, my brother had a terrible accident and was paralyzed, and my husband got a serious illness, and the house caught fire, and my husband's aircraft was scrapped, and we were moved south to England, and our children were left at boarding school up here. So, there were all kind of challenges that happened to other people, but really affected my world. And then the biggest challenge I faced was when I was going for command, which is the process during which you become a captain. I actually failed my first attempt at command, and I talk about it all the time because I think it's really important we talk about failure. Nobody wants to talk about stuff they've got wrong. And actually that's where we grow and we become so much better. So when I had got the MBE and I had a lot of press attention, and people kept saying to me, "Oh, we'd love to hear your story. You must tell it." And I would go and do a talk at a school or a Rotary club or something like that. And, for 30 or 40 minutes, I'd talk about what I'd done. But that's never the full story. You can't fit everything in. It's really hard to actually go into depth with, what was Emma like as a little girl? What did happen in that first year? And what was your illness? And what happened with that? And how did you set the charity up? And what happened as a result? So actually, I decided I was going to write the story down, partly because I'd read another book. I don't know if you've read The Salt Path by Raina Wynn. It's a really lovely book and about a couple that go and walk the Southwest Coast Path in England. So it's a book I can recommend if you like to read, real life kind of stories. And we were reading that, and my husband said to me, "Your story is so much better than this. You should write it down." So I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose, I'll write it down. And if nothing else, it will be there as a memoir for my children. And then I was introduced to an agent who said, "This is great. This is going to go global. These are the subjects from your story that I think are the most interesting. Write down everything about those," which I did. And then actually, he wasn't able to secure a book deal for me. So we parted company amicably. And I was then introduced directly to a publisher who published my book, Fisher King Publishing. So they then took it on. They loved it, and they published this, and it's so nice. It's got a matte finish, and it's just really nice. And the paper's nice. And I didn't want to publish a book on horrible paper. When I'm reading a book, I want it to feel nice. So that came out last May. And, I didn't do this thing that some people do where they reduce it to 99p on Kindle so that everybody buys it at the same time, and then it becomes the number one bestseller because the algorithm thinks that everybody's buying it. I didn't do that because I thought if people want to buy the book, they'll buy the book. You should all buy the book, by the way.
Everyone should buy the book, Grounded.
Everyone should. Yeah. And tell all your friends to buy it as well. And you can get it on Kindle, and you can get it in hardback and softback. But, I didn't do that thing. I was like, I don't want to chase an algorithm. But, in the first month, I sold 500 copies, which for an unknown author publishing their first book was astonishing because they weren't all my friends that bought that, and the numbers have gone up ever since, and just people buy it and they read it and they write really nice reviews about it and put them on Amazon. And then, people sometimes contact me and say, "I read your book and it's really meant this to me and it's really taught me this." And, it's really lovely to know that the words you've written down have been meaningful to somebody and have actually taught them something and not just been a nice story to read.
So true. Congratulations. It just looks like a gorgeous book. I understand my book I did with the traditional publisher because it has to feel good and I wanted to be proud of it everywhere. And it sounds like you did the very same thing. It really matters. That's our baby.
Well, absolutely. And you mentioned earlier that I'm an artist, and, I have been running a business on, it's kind of on the back burner at the moment, but I'm drinking out of one of my mugs here. So you can see I paint things like this, and I put them onto mugs and paint and things like that. And one of the things I was told early on is never let something go out with your name on it that's not good quality. because you can't get it back then. And if ever anybody sees anything of yours that's a bit rubbish, then it's got your name on it. That's what they associate with you. So whether it's a book or a painting or your brand, or your personal brand, if you're doing a podcast, you don't do it with messy hair and, mud on your face, do you? And if you're on TV, that's why people get made up to go on TV. And that's why we dress up to go out, because we know photos are going to be taken of us. So actually, it's about making sure everything you do is the best quality you can achieve.
Gorgeous. Now, I want to ask about communication, because I ask all my guests something about communication. How did you communicate effectively and with authority and the safety that is essential in being a captain in mostly a male-dominated atmosphere?
Well, it's interesting. We've obviously talking a lot about that in the last few days, because it was International Women's Day on Saturday. So I've been doing a lot of podcasts and a lot of webinars and keynotes about equity rather than equality, and talking about being in a male-dominated industry. And actually, there's a lot of male allies out there. There are a lot of, if you're qualified to do a job, people don't question your gender. The aircraft doesn't know or care if I'm a woman or a man, and neither should anyone else. So actually, the way that I communicated with people was to get to know them. So when I was in the right-hand seat of the aircraft, learning my craft as a first officer, I would go and talk to the crew in the turnaround when I'd make them cups of tea, because they spend all day making new cups of tea, and I would just offer to serve them, let me look after you for a minute. And that kind of meant that you build up a relationship with people. And that means that you can have fun at work, but it also means that when you need to say something serious, you can switch it off straight away, because they know that most of the time you are fun to be around, you're very thoughtful and kind. And if you say, I actually need to tell you something serious now, they switch straight away, and that they trust you. And that relationship building builds trust. And I made sure that the trust between me and my crew was built to the point where I knew they would follow me over hot coals if I asked them to. And they did when I asked them to come and support Project Wingman, our charity. I asked them to go into hospitals where there was death on unprecedented levels, and they all went. They all said, yep, no problem. Nobody said, oh, I don't know about that. Everybody knew that I had their back. And I spent a lot of time making sure that my crew did trust me. So when I said something needed to be done in a certain way, or if there was something that I needed to get them to focus on, they would just do it, because they knew that they knew that they could trust me, and they knew I wasn't going to let them down.
Fantastic. What is next for you? What do you got? What are you conjuring up right now?
Well, what aren't I conjuring up?
Yeah.
So I'm really delighted that the time and investment I've spent on my business in the last year particularly has been paying off. And I'm now speaking globally. I'm working with companies in the US. I'm working with companies in Asia. So I go and talk about grounded leadership with its compass points of humanity, humility, and humor, which I believe have never been needed more than now. We live in very unstable times, and we live in a very AI-driven and automated world, which are both great, but we need to make sure we keep humanity at the center of that. So I'm doing a lot of work there, and on decision making, and having the mindset to build resilient teams at pace, because I've done that. So that's brilliant, because that's growing in the way that I really hoped it would. But I've also decided I'm going to go back to flying, but not commercially. I'm going to get my private license back. And I have a plan for that, which I'm not going to tell you about now, but if you follow me, you'll find out. So I'm going to go back to flying. There's another book being planned, which is telling the wingman story. Because although we don't all want to talk about COVID anymore, I think it's really important to tell the story of the 6,500 people and through their eyes. So I will tell the story, but I'm going to interview people from the medical profession and volunteers who stepped up and just say, why did you do this? And what did it mean to you? And I'm going to tell their story through, my story through their eyes, their story through my eyes. we don't know which way around it's going to be yet, but that's being planned right now. In fact, I've drafted it out. I just need to put pen to paper. And then the big bold plan I have is for this time next year, I will just have come down from scaling Mount Kilimanjaro. So I'm going to go up a mountain, which I don't like heights, by the way, and I don't really like walking uphill. So I'm going to go up like the biggest solo mountain in the world. So obviously Everest is bigger, but this is the biggest isolated mountain in the world. And you can go up, you go up without oxygen, and it's 6,340 feet high. Sorry, 6,340 meters, 19,340 feet high. And I'm going to go up that. So I'm kind of training for that at the moment. And I'm doing that by running half marathons and just doing lots of training to make myself as fit as possible, basically.
Nothing much going on.
So not much going up, really, pretty free.
Oh, there's got nothing going on, folks. There's really nothing happening that matters. Oh, that is such an inspiration. Thank you for being here, sharing your wisdom, your beautiful book, Grounded. People pick that up. And how can folks best reach you?
So if you would like to contact me and you are on LinkedIn, you will find me on LinkedIn. Just if you look up Emma Henderson Speaker or Emma Henderson, MBE, MRAES. I'm a member of the Royal Aeronautical Society. But if you just look up Emma Henderson Speaker or Emma Henderson Pilot, you'll kind of find me on the internet. But I have a website, which is www.emma-henderson.com. You can also find me on places like Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, but all of that content is the same as I put on LinkedIn. So that's the best way to reach me. And there's a contact form there that you can use to get in touch with me. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn, send me a private message. I always reply, and I mentor people into the aviation industry, but I also work with people who are scared of flying. So I've actually got a business partner in Salt Lake City who was terrified of flying, and I helped him to get on a plane. And we now have a little side business that we run together called Flight Deck 365, and they are fear of flying flashcards. So I help people I explain things to people. I explain why it's safe to fly, and I help them to get over their fear.
Well, there you go. So for our folks around the world who might be afraid of flying, but you really want to travel the world, there you go. Another solution. Emma, what a pleasure. You're such an inspiration. You just keep impacting and up-leveling and benefiting the world. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Don't forget to stay tuned for the next episode of Up-Level Your Communication. We'll say bye for now.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to our show. If you'd like to have a conversation about how developing your communication and presence skills will connect you to opportunities, impact, income, and fulfillment, let's talk about your future. Go to milunafausch.com and book a conversation with me. You can also find out more about my Forbes book and our podcast music, Strong Body.
Thank you for enjoying this content by Billionaires in Boxes. If you would like to be a guest or a host, be sure to get in contact with us at billionairesinboxes.com.